When her heart shattered before everyone, only the ruthless Duke finally dared to move. Naomi had spent 45 minutes standing in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the same curl for the fourth time, trying to calm the feeling in her chest that had been sitting there since morning. It was not excitement. She had told herself it was excitement, but deep down, somewhere she refused to look directly, she knew it was fear, wearing a costume. The party hall was already full. She could hear the music and laughter bleeding through the walls of the small corridor where she stood alone, pressing her palm flat against her collarbone, breathing slowly. 70 guests, people who had known her since childhood, colleagues, cousins, the couple from 2 doors down who had always said she and Marcus were meant for each other. All of them were in that room, holding champagne glasses, wearing their best clothes, waiting to celebrate the beginning of her forever. She loved Marcus Webb. She had loved him for 4 years with the kind of love that reorganizes a person. She had moved cities for him, not because he asked directly, but because she saw how much easier his life would be if she were closer, and she had not thought twice. She had left her position at an established firm in Bristol to build something smaller, more uncertain, in London, just to be near him. She had said yes to every family dinner of his when she was tired. She had bitten her tongue in a dozen arguments, because she was more afraid of losing him than of being wrong. She had made herself quieter, smaller, more convenient, and she had called it love because she did not yet know that love was not supposed to cost that much of a person. She straightened her dress, checked her lipstick one final time, and walked into the room. The hall was beautiful. She had made it beautiful. Every detail had her fingerprints on it, from the arrangement of white and blush flowers at the entrance, to the soft amber lighting she had specifically requested from the venue manager after visiting 3 times to get it right. The round tables were covered in pale linen, and at the center of each one sat a small framed photograph of her and Marcus from different years, different trips, different versions of themselves. She had printed those photographs herself, chosen each one carefully, laughing quietly at the memories as she sorted through hundreds of images on her laptop at midnight, 3 weeks before the party. She had planned it all. That was what she did. Naomi Caldwell planned things beautifully and gave them away. Marcus found her near the entrance and kissed her cheek. He smelled like his usual cologne, and something else she could not name. He looked handsome. He always looked handsome, she noticed, briefly, that his eyes did not quite meet hers when he smiled, but she tucked that observation somewhere she would not examine until later. Her best friend, Diane Horton, reached her first and wrapped both arms around her tight. Diane was the kind of woman who said exactly what she thought and loved loudly and without conditions. She had been Naomi's closest friend for 11 years, through 3 apartments, 2 heartbreaks, before Marcus, 1 particularly bad winter, and a complicated situation involving a broken lease and a borrowed cat. She had also, 8 months ago, said something to Naomi that Naomi had not wanted to hear. They had been sitting in Diane's kitchen on a Tuesday evening, drinking tea that had gone cold, and Diane had set her mug down carefully, the way she always did when she was about to say something she had been holding for too long. "I need to tell you something," Diane had said. "Then tell me," Naomi had answered, already feeling the walls going up inside her. "I have been watching Marcus for a while. Not watching him like that. I mean paying attention. And I think something is off. I do not know exactly what it is, but when you are not in the room, he is different. He goes quieter, like he is carrying something." Naomi had laughed. It had not been a real laugh. "Diane, you have never liked him." "That is not true. I thought he was good for you in the beginning. I genuinely did. But I think he has changed. Or maybe I am finally seeing what was always there. I just do not want you to get hurt." Naomi had reached across the table and squeezed Diane's hand. "I appreciate you. I do. But you do not have to worry. Marcus and I are solid. We know each other." Diane had not pushed further. She had nodded, and picked up her cold tea, and changed the subject to something lighter. But Naomi had noticed, in the car on the way home, that her hands were gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. She had not thought about that conversation again. She had filed it away, in the part of her mind reserved for things she was not ready to open. Now, standing inside the hall, she had transformed into something genuinely lovely, with 70 people moving around her, and music playing softly, and Marcus standing nearby, talking to his brother, with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. She felt that same feeling from the corridor, the one she had called excitement, the one that was not excitement. She made her rounds. She hugged Marcus's mother, a tall and pleasant woman named Gloria, who had always treated Naomi warmly, though never quite warmly enough to feel completely natural. She spoke with her own aunt, her cousin Patrick, a colleague named Helen who had driven 2 hours to be there. She accepted compliments on the decorations. She said thank you 20 times. She laughed in the right places. And through all of it, she kept her eyes moving the way she always did at events she organized, checking the drink levels, noticing which table needed attention, watching the lighting to make sure the dimmers had not shifted. Even at her own engagement party, she could not stop working. It was a quality people had always admired in her, and one she had never quite recognized as the coping mechanism it was. Naomi had grown up in a household where love was demonstrated through effort. Her mother had not been a warm woman in the traditional sense. She did not give long hugs or say the words easily, but she kept the house clean, and dinner on the table, and showed up to every school event without being asked. Naomi had learned early that love was what you did, not what you said. You earned your place in people's lives by being useful, reliable, present. You gave and gave and gave, and that was how you made sure no one left. She had carried this belief into every relationship she had ever been in, though she would not have called it a belief. She would have called it simply the way she was. Marcus was standing near the small raised platform at the front of the room, where a microphone had been set up for toasts later in the evening. He was talking to a woman Naomi recognized but could not immediately place. Slim, dark hair, a red dress that had clearly been chosen with intention. She was laughing at something Marcus said, and her laugh was not quiet. Naomi's eyes moved away. She joined a conversation nearby. The evening progressed the way evenings do when you are moving inside them, moment by moment, not yet aware that one of those moments is about to divide your life into a before and an after. She ate a little. She drank 1 glass of champagne. She danced briefly with her cousin Patrick, who had no rhythm whatsoever, and knew it, and danced anyway, which she had always loved about him. Around 9 in the evening, Marcus's oldest friend, a man called Oliver Grant, took the microphone for the first toast. Oliver was funny and well-meaning, and said warm things about how Marcus had talked about Naomi on the night they first met, how he had come home and said he had just had a conversation with the most quietly impressive person he had ever encountered. The room laughed and made sounds of appreciation. Naomi felt a genuine rush of feeling at that. She looked at Marcus, and he looked back at her and smiled, and for a moment, everything was exactly what she had believed it to be. Oliver finished his toast, and the room applauded, and more champagne was poured. Then Marcus walked toward the microphone himself. This had not been planned. The program for the evening had toasts from Oliver and from Naomi's aunt, and then a brief speech from Marcus and Naomi together. That was what she had arranged. Marcus stepping forward alone, unannounced, was not on the timeline she had prepared. She watched him take the microphone. She noticed his jaw was tight. The room settled. He thanked everyone for coming. He said it was a beautiful evening, and he looked briefly at the flowers and the lighting and the photographs on the tables, and he said that all of it was Naomi's work, because it always was. The room laughed softly. A few people looked at her with warm expressions. He paused. The pause was too long. And then he said something that did not make sense at first. His voice was steady. She would remember later how steady his voice was, and she would find that the most difficult part to sit with. He said that he had been carrying something for a long time, something he had not known how to say, something he had told himself he would find the right moment to address, and that he understood now there was no right moment, and that waiting longer would only make the harm greater. The room had gone completely still. Naomi stood at the edge of the crowd and felt her body stop the way a person stops when the ground moves under them. Everything in her went absolutely quiet. He said her name. He said he was sorry. He said the word sorry 3 times in different arrangements of the same sentence. He said he could not go through with the engagement. Somewhere behind Naomi, someone dropped a glass. She heard it, but did not turn toward the sound. He said he had been in another relationship. He did not call it by any other name. He said it plainly and without decoration. He said the woman in the red dress, whose name was Caroline, had been part of his life for almost a year. He said Caroline was also in the room. A sound came from somewhere in the crowd. Not a loud sound. A held breath released. Naomi did not move. She was still standing exactly where she had been, one hand loosely at her side, the other still holding the base of the champagne glass she had nearly finished. She could feel the cold of it in her fingers. She could feel the carpet beneath her heels. She was aware of her own heartbeat in a way that was entirely new to her, as though it had become something outside of herself, a separate engine running in a body she was only visiting. 70 people were in that room, and every single one of them turned toward her. She had planned the flowers. She had printed the photographs. She had driven to this venue 3 times to get the lighting exactly right. She had stood in the corridor outside and told herself that the feeling in her chest was excitement. Her knees moved. She was not sure afterward whether they moved inward or outward, only that they did not hold her the way she needed them to, and she understood with complete and sudden clarity that she was going to fall. She did not fall. A hand closed around her arm. Firm, immediate, not gentle exactly, but certain in the way that a seatbelt is certain, doing its job without asking whether it is wanted. She looked at the hand, then at the arm, then at the face of the man the hand belonged to. She knew who he was. Everyone in the room knew who Adrian Voss was. He was Marcus's business associate, a name that appeared in conversations the way other names did not, always attached to a quality, always followed by a slight shift in the speaker's tone. People called him sharp, people called him difficult. People said he was the kind of man who made decisions without requiring anyone's approval, and who had never, in the years they had known him, been seen to flinch at anything. He was not looking at Marcus. He was not looking at the crowd, or at the microphone, or at Caroline in her red dress. He was looking at Naomi. "I have you," he said. His voice was low. It was not kind in the way people usually meant kindness, which was soft and reassuring, and designed to comfort. It was something else. It was direct. It was the voice of someone who was not asking whether she needed help, but simply stating that help was present. She gripped his arm without deciding to. The room was still buzzing. Marcus was still speaking, saying something more, and people were beginning to move and whisper and look between Naomi and the platform and back again. Someone was crying near the bar. Adrian did not let go of her arm. He did not guide her anywhere, or tell her what to do. He simply stayed exactly where he was, steady, and kept his eyes on her face with an expression she could not read, which was not unusual for him, but which she found, in that moment, strangely bearable. She straightened. She did not know how. It was purely mechanical, the body doing what it had been trained to do by a lifetime of not falling apart in public. She took a single breath that was shallow, and then one that was slightly less so. The champagne glass was still in her hand. She set it down on a nearby table without looking at it, and it landed cleanly. The lights were still the amber she had specifically requested. The white and blush flowers were still beautiful. The photographs of her and Marcus from different years were still in their small frames at the center of every round table. The music had stopped. The caterers had moved back against the walls. 70 people were standing inside the room she had made, watching the life she had built come apart without warning, quietly and in front of everyone. She did not cry, not yet. She stood inside the room she had built and felt everything she had been carrying fall away from her all at once, not gently, the way leaves fall, but all together, the way a shelf gives way. And through it all, the only thing that was solid was the grip on her arm, firm and without hesitation, belonging to a man no one had ever described as kind. Outside, the night air hit Naomi like something physical. Diane had her arm, and Adrian walked just behind them through the back corridor, past the caterers who stood very still with their hands folded, past the coat rack, through the fire door and out onto the paved area where the delivery crates were stacked and a single lamp burned above the exit. Naomi sat down on the edge of a crate. She looked at the lamp. She looked at the narrow strip of dark sky above the roofline. She heard the muffled noise of the hall behind her, voices rising and overlapping in that specific texture that happens when a crowd is trying to make sense of something that does not make sense. Diane did not speak immediately. She sat beside her and put a hand on her back and simply stayed there, which was the right thing to do, and which Naomi registered somewhere beneath the numbness as an act of love she did not have words for yet. Adrian leaned against the wall a short distance away. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and he was looking at the pavement, and he was very still. She had not thought about him in any sustained way before tonight. He existed at the edge of her awareness, as Marcus's colleague, someone who appeared at certain professional occasions, and stood slightly apart from the main conversation, and had a way of listening that was different from how most people listened, focused, and without performance. She had spoken to him 4 times that she could recall, brief exchanges, courteous and impersonal. She had formed the impression that he found small talk effortful, and did not bother concealing this, which she had found mildly interesting, without thinking further about it. She thought about it now. The way he had moved through the crowd toward her. The way he had arrived not at a run, not with visible alarm, but with a kind of immediate quiet certainty that made it seem less like a choice than a natural response. The way a person reaches for something falling without first deciding to. She thought about the words he had said. Not "you are all right," or "everything will be fine," or any of the things people said in those moments that were meant kindly and landed as nothing. He had said, "I have you." 2 words, present tense. It had not been comfort. It had been a fact. "Thank you," she said, not looking at him, for earlier. "You do not need to thank me," he said. "I know I do not need to. I am choosing to." A brief pause. "All right," he said. Diane glanced at him. He did not seem to notice, or did not show that he noticed, which she could not determine. "I am going to go back in and handle some things," Diane said. She looked at Naomi carefully. "Will you be okay for a few minutes?" Naomi nodded. Diane looked at Adrian with a question in her expression that was not exactly a question. "I will stay," he said, which answered it. Diane went back inside. The lamp hummed faintly overhead. A car went by on the street beyond the building. Someone in the kitchen portion of the venue was stacking things, the rhythmic sound of surfaces against surfaces. "I planned everything in that room," Naomi said. She was not speaking to him specifically. She was speaking to the air, to the lamp, to the city beyond the roofline. The flowers, the photographs, the arrangement of the tables. "I drove here 3 times, because the lighting was not right. The venue manager knows my name, and the name of my cat." She paused. "I do not actually have a cat," she added. Something shifted in Adrian's face. It was not quite a smile. It was the smallest possible movement in the direction of one. "The caterers know my order for the canapés. I tasted 17 versions of one sauce." She looked at her hands. "I gave everything to that evening." "You did," he said. "And I planned the party for someone who was not honest with me." "Yes." The way he said it was notable, not with apology, or with the softening inflection people used when they were trying to cushion a truth. Simply yes. As though the truth deserved to be stated plainly, and she was capable of receiving it that way. She looked up at him. "Did you know?" she asked. The question surprised him. She could see that in the slight change of his posture, a small adjustment, nothing dramatic. "No," he said, "I did not know what Marcus was going to say tonight. I did not know about the other relationship." She studied him. "Do you believe me?" he asked, which was itself an interesting question, that he asked it at all, that he cared whether she did. "Yes," she said, "I think I do." He nodded once. She looked back at the lamp. "Why did you come tonight?" she asked. "You and Marcus have worked together for years, but you are not someone who goes to engagement parties for the atmosphere." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He asked me to come. He said it was important." She absorbed that. She thought about what it meant, that Marcus had asked Adrian specifically to be present, on the evening he had planned to do what he did. She turned this over in her mind, without arriving at a clean answer, only an awareness that there were things she did not yet understand about the mechanics of what had just happened to her, and that understanding them would take time. "Were you there when he made the decision?" she asked, "to do it the way he did, in front of everyone?" "No," Adrian said. "I found out with the rest of the room." "What did you think when he started speaking?" Another pause. He seemed to be considering whether to answer precisely or approximately, and to be choosing precision. "I thought he was making a serious error in how he was doing it," Adrian said. "And then I watched your face, and stopped thinking about his error." She looked at him again. She had not expected that. She had not expected him to say something that was, in its plainness, one of the more genuinely tender things anyone had said to her in a long time. She did not think he had intended it to be tender. She thought he had intended it to be accurate, but the two had coincided, and the result was something she did not know what to do with. She said nothing. The door opened, and Diane came back through with Naomi's coat draped over one arm and her bag hanging from the other. "Car is coming," Diane said. "Sandra is handling the guests. Your aunt is fine. She is being very dramatic, but she is fine." Naomi almost smiled. She stood up. She took the coat and put it on. She took the bag. She looked at Adrian. He was watching her with that same quality of attention she had noticed inside, unbroken and direct, with nothing performed in it. "You should go back in," she said. "You came as a guest. You should not have to stand out here." "I came because Marcus asked me to," Adrian said. "That invitation ended about 40 minutes ago." She looked at him for a moment longer than she intended to. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Naomi," he said. She walked through the door, and down the corridor, and through the remaining guests, and out the front of the venue, into the dark street, where the car was waiting. She got in. Diane got in beside her. The door closed. They pulled away. She watched the venue get smaller through the rear window. Its lit entrance. The couple who had stepped outside to talk. The ordinary face of the building that had contained the most extraordinary evening of her life. She watched until it was gone. She turned forward. She breathed. Diane did not say anything for several minutes. Then she reached over and took Naomi's hand and held it, and Naomi let her, and they moved through the city in silence. The lights going past, the streets changing, the world entirely unchanged and yet different in every way that mattered. "What happens now?" Naomi said finally, not asking for an answer, just releasing the question into the car. "Now you sleep," Diane said. "Everything else waits." Naomi nodded. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in 4 years, she did not try to plan what came next. The morning after is its own specific kind of silence. Naomi woke at 7:14 in Diane's spare bedroom. She knew the time, because the small clock on the bedside table had a green display she had been looking at in the dark for some time before fully waking. The ceiling was unfamiliar. The pillow smelled of fabric softener. The sounds of the building were different from what she was used to. For 4 seconds, she did not remember what had happened the night before. Those 4 seconds were a gift her mind gave her only once. Then the memory came back, not gradually, not in pieces, but whole, the way something large lands. She lay still. She was wearing a t-shirt belonging to Diane, and plain pajama trousers she kept in the spare drawer, because she had slept here often enough over the years that a drawer had been given to her. Her dark green dress was folded neatly over the chair in the corner. She had no memory of folding it. Diane must have done it. She breathed. She took stock. The apartment she had been living in was technically in Marcus's name. She had known this, and had not addressed it, because she had not thought she would need to. She had sublet her own flat in Finchley to a postgraduate student named Paul, who had been an ideal tenant, quiet and prompt with the rent, and who had 3 months ago renewed his lease for another full year, because she had told him she would not be needing it back. She had told him that because she had expected to move with Marcus into the larger flat they had been looking at in Islington. That plan was gone, which meant she had no flat. She breathed again and moved on. Her business had been growing. In the 2 years since she left Bristol and built her own small events company from scratch, she had assembled a roster of clients she was proud of. 12 corporate accounts, steady and professional. 8 private clients, mostly weddings and significant celebrations. 2 of those private clients were people who had met Marcus, who thought of Naomi as half of a pair, who had hired her in part because they liked what they saw of her life. She did not know what would happen with those 2 clients. She suspected she would find out quickly. She moved on. She thought about the professional impact more broadly. She had made introductions through Marcus, attended events with Marcus, been introduced at several important early meetings as Marcus's partner, which had softened certain doors. She had always slightly resented this because she was good at what she did and wanted to be recognized for that. But she had accepted it as the practical reality of how professional circles worked. She was now going to have to untangle her professional identity from his in ways she had not mapped. She moved on. She thought about what it was going to feel like to go to his flat and collect her things. She thought about the bed. She thought about the kitchen. Specifically, the corner cabinet that always hung open, and the way she had closed it 100 times. Gently, without complaint, and never once asked him to simply close it himself. She thought about the set of keys she had on her keyring right now, in the bag on the floor beside the bed. She would need to give those back. She pressed her hand flat over her sternum. The grief was enormous. She felt it clearly now, in the morning quiet, without the crowd and the noise and the pure shock of the previous evening to insulate her from it. It was not only about Marcus. It was about the life she had been building inside her imagination. The future that had seemed so solid and was now simply gone, like a room with no door to return to. She breathed. She was 31 years old. She had built a business from nothing. She had navigated a cross-country move alone. She had organized 70-person events where 40 things went wrong before lunch, and none of them showed in the final product. She was someone who solved problems. She was someone who kept going. She would keep going now. That knowledge did not remove the grief. It did not touch the grief. But it existed alongside it, which was enough for the moment. The door opened, and Diane's face appeared. "You are awake," Diane said. "Yes. Tea? Please." Diane disappeared. The sounds of the kettle, the cabinet with the loose hinge that required a slightly harder push to close. Naomi had learned the sounds of this flat over 11 years, and they were familiar in a way that was comforting right now. The particular comfort of a place that had always been reliably itself. She sat up. Diane came in, with 2 mugs, and sat on the edge of the bed. They did not speak immediately. They sat in the pale morning light coming through the curtain, and drank tea that was slightly too hot, and the silence was the easy kind, the kind that did not need to be filled. "You were right," Naomi said eventually. "Diane did not say I told you." She did not make any move to claim the territory of having been correct. She said, "I did not want to be. I know. I genuinely did not want to be right about that. I know that too." A pause. "I should have listened," Naomi said. "Not because you are always right, because you are famously not always right. That is accurate. But you were paying attention to something I refused to look at, and I shut you down. You were protecting something that mattered to you," Diane said. "I was afraid," Naomi said. It was the first time she had said it plainly, to anyone including herself. "I was afraid of what it would mean if you were right. I was afraid of being wrong about him. I was afraid of being alone, and so I chose not to see it." Diane did not offer reassurance, she just listened, which was what Naomi needed. "That is something I need to look at," Naomi said. "Not just with Marcus, with how I have operated in general. The making myself small, the making myself useful so people will stay. The choosing not to see things because the truth is inconvenient." "That is a very large thought for 7 in the morning," Diane said. "I have been awake for a while." Diane nodded. She looked into her mug. "Can I say something?" "Yes." "What you just described, the making yourself small, the being afraid to see things clearly, that is something a lot of people do. That is not a character flaw you invented. It is a pattern that developed for reasons that made sense at the time. The work is in changing it, not in punishing yourself for having it." Naomi was quiet. "Also," Diane added, "you have to find somewhere to live." Naomi made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one. "I have been thinking about that," she said. "Paul is still in your flat." "I know, his lease is for another year. I have a spare room," Diane said. Naomi looked at her. Diane was watching her with an expression that was entirely serious. "Diane, I am not offering out of pity. I am offering because I have a spare room, and you are my closest friend, and I would rather come home to you than to an empty corridor." Naomi looked at her mug. "It would not be forever," Diane said, "just until you sort out what comes next. I would pay rent." "Yes, you would. And I would not reorganize your kitchen. I am not willing to negotiate on that. The kitchen stays exactly as it is. Your kitchen is chaos. My kitchen is a system you do not understand." For the first time since the previous evening, Naomi smiled. It was small, and it was brief, but it was real. She looked at the dim light coming through the curtain. She had one day at a time in front of her. That was all she had, and all she needed for now. She would not plan the whole map of what came next. She would not draft the strategy. She would simply exist in this morning, in this spare room, with this mug of slightly too hot tea, with the person who had always told her the truth, even when she had not wanted to hear it. And at the edge of her thoughts, in a way she did not examine directly, but could not entirely ignore, was the lamp above the back door of the venue, and the pale light it had cast over the paved area, and the man who had stood there in the quiet, without trying to fill it, and the way he had said goodnight, using her name, which was such a small thing, and had somehow been exactly the right one. She set it aside. She drank her tea. The morning came on. The first 2 weeks were a practical emergency, dressed up as ordinary days. Naomi moved into Diane's spare room on a Sunday afternoon, with 2 suitcases and a box of things she had collected from Marcus's flat on the Saturday before, in an exchange that had lasted 14 minutes, and during which she and Marcus had spoken a total of 9 sentences to each other. He had not argued. He had not explained further than he already had. He had stood in the kitchen doorway, with his arms crossed, and looked at the floor, and she had gathered her things efficiently and without conversation, and she had left the keys on the counter near the door, and she had not looked back. She had cried in the car, not dramatically, quietly and steadily, the way you cry when the emotion is real and enormous, and you are also driving on a dual carriageway and need to function. She had stopped before she reached Diane's street, and sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel, and then she had dried her face and got out of the car and gone inside. That had been that. The following 2 weeks were dense with logistics. She called Paul and had an honest conversation, in which she explained what had happened without excessive detail. Paul, who was 24, and kind in the uncomplicated way certain young people are, expressed genuine sympathy, and asked if there was anything he could do. She told him to stay, and pay his rent, and look after the flat, which was what she actually needed, and he said he would. She ended the call feeling, oddly, slightly better. She contacted her 12 corporate clients individually, to inform them of a change in her personal circumstances that would not affect her professional commitments. She was careful with the language. Professional, warm, specific. She received 11 responses that were supportive. The 12th did not respond, and she crossed that name off her list and did not chase it. She contacted 2 private clients, the ones who had known her as part of a pair. One of them sent a message that was warm and continued the booking without comment. The other canceled, citing a personal reason that was clearly not the actual reason, and Naomi accepted it without argument. She opened a spreadsheet and looked at her finances with the kind of unflinching attention she usually reserved for client proposals. What she saw was sobering and also manageable, which was a better combination than she had expected. She had savings, not enormous savings, but enough. She had no personal debt beyond a credit card she cleared monthly. She had income, reduced slightly but still present. She had a plan, which was to build the plan one step at a time rather than all at once. She was careful with herself in those 2 weeks, in a way she had not been careful before. She ate properly. She slept early. She took long walks in the mornings before the city got too loud, along the canal mostly, where the light came off the water in a particular flat way she found calming. She read novels in the evenings. She did not go on her phone after 9 at night. She did not look at Marcus's accounts, though she was aware that information about the situation had circulated in the social circles they had shared, and that people were talking about it in the way people talked about things that had happened to someone they knew, but not to them. She did not look. She focused on the walkable distance between where she was and where she needed to get to. On the 15th day, her phone showed a number she did not have saved. She almost did not answer. She answered. Naomi, a voice she recognized, even without the name attached, low, direct, efficient. She sat up straighter, which she noticed and found mildly amusing. Adrian, she said. I hope this is not an intrusion. A pause. Marcus gave me your number 2 months ago, for a professional reason that did not end up being necessary. I kept it. All right, she said. I wanted to ask how you are. She thought about what to say. She considered several versions. She chose the honest one. I am functional. I am rebuilding. It is not comfortable, but it is progress. Good, he said. A brief silence. That is what I wanted to know, he said. I will not take more of your time. Adrian. Yes. Why did you really call? Another pause, slightly longer. Because I thought about you, he said, and I did not think it was appropriate to pretend I had not. She sat with that for a moment. It was such a straightforward thing to say. It was exactly the kind of thing most people would talk around, and he had simply said it, directly and without decoration. That is honest, she said. It is what I have. She looked at the window. The pale afternoon light came through the gap in the curtain. Outside she could hear traffic, and somewhere a child calling out in a garden. I am going to be busy for a while, she said. I am sorting out quite a lot. I understand. But I do not object to you calling. A pause. All right, he said. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Naomi. She set the phone down. She looked at the ceiling. She was not ready for anything. She was still standing inside the rubble of what had been her life until 3 weeks ago, still sorting through the pieces, still figuring out which ones were worth keeping, and which ones had never been as solid as they looked. She was nowhere near ready for anything. But the call had happened, and she had told him she did not object, and she had meant it. She went back to her book, the canal walk in the morning, the spreadsheet, the one step at a time. But the call sat at the edge of things, not loudly, not demanding attention, just present. The way a lamp is present in a room you are not using, turned on, quiet, there if you need it. Naomi's business event planner registration renewed in the 3rd week of rebuilding, and she marked the date on her calendar the way she marked all professional dates, with a small tick and a note about what needed to be actioned by when. The world kept moving and she moved with it. She was working at Diane's kitchen table on a Friday morning, which had become her primary workspace since her temporary office setup in the spare room created a light glare that gave her headaches. She had claimed a specific corner of the table, the one nearest the window, and Diane had agreed to work around her with minimal complaint and only occasional commentary about how Naomi's organizational system for her folders was making her feel judged. Her phone buzzed. A client named Fiona Carver, a corporate account she had maintained for 18 months, was asking to move their quarterly planning meeting from the following Tuesday to Monday because of a travel conflict. Naomi replied immediately, confirmed Monday, updated her calendar, and went back to the proposal she was drafting. The phone buzzed again. Not a number she had saved. Different from Adrian's number. She checked it. A London number, professional looking. She answered. The caller introduced himself as a man named Charles Lund, from a firm she recognized, a mid-sized events management company that had been quietly expanding over the past year. He said he had been referred to her by a mutual contact he named, someone she had worked with briefly and respectfully 2 years prior. He said he had heard about her work and would like to discuss whether there was a basis for a professional conversation. She did not ask what kind of professional conversation. She asked if Wednesday morning worked for him. It did. She ended the call and sat for a moment, looking at the autumn light coming through the kitchen window. She had not solicited that call. She had not been in a position to solicit anything beyond keeping her existing clients maintained while she stabilized. The call had arrived, a piece of something she had not built yet arriving before the building, because her reputation had kept moving, even when she had been standing still. She wrote a note to herself on the pad beside the laptop. Follow up on intro to Charles Lund. Prepare case for meeting. Diane appeared in the doorway, eating a piece of toast with peanut butter. You look like something happened, Diane said. A potential new client called. As in the kind you want? As in a company I have been aware of for a while. Diane ate her toast. See, the universe is watching. The universe is not responsible. My previous work is responsible. Those can coexist. Naomi returned to her proposal. She was aware of a low, steady feeling in her chest that was not the grief, not the numbness, not the exhausted determination of the first weeks. It was something different, quieter. It felt like the beginning of something reclaiming itself. She worked through the morning. Around noon, a message arrived. It was from Adrian. There was a professional event the following Thursday evening, a small gathering of people in adjacent industries, the kind of event Naomi would have attended with Marcus and now would attend, if she attended, alone. He had been asked to speak briefly about a recent project and was told he was permitted to invite 2 guests. He said he was mentioning it without pressure. She was not required to respond if she preferred not to. She stared at the message for a moment. She was aware of the various ways she could read the invitation. She was aware that someone else in her position might find it too soon, might find the directness of it uncomfortable, might put it in a category and close the lid. She was also aware that she had been editing her own instincts for 4 years, in service of a relationship that had not been honest, and that she had specifically told herself, in the early morning clarity of Diane's spare room, that she was going to stop doing that. She wrote back. She said Thursday could work. She said she would need to check one thing and confirm by Monday. She checked the one thing, which was a client call she moved without difficulty. She confirmed by Saturday. Adrian replied with the event details. 1 sentence, a time, an address, the name of the organizer. That was all. She filed the information in her calendar and went back to work. She was not building a story. She was not drawing a line from that night in the party venue to this message on a Friday at noon and concluding anything. She was a woman who had recently had her life restructured around her and who was moving forward one workable step at a time, and Thursday was a step she could make, without pretending it was more or less than what it was. That was the whole thought. She drank the rest of her cold coffee and opened the next document. 3 floors up from Diane's kitchen, on a street running parallel to the one outside the window, a cat sat on a window ledge and looked at nothing in particular. The city hummed. Naomi worked. The event on Thursday was held in a building near the river that had been a warehouse in a previous decade and had been converted into the kind of neutral-toned professional space that appeared everywhere in London now. Pale walls and exposed beams, and very good lighting. There were perhaps 80 people present. The format was informal, small clusters, drinks, a few brief presentations from practitioners in adjacent fields. Naomi arrived at 7:15, which was slightly later than she preferred, but earlier than fashionable, and stood for a moment near the entrance getting her bearings. She had chosen what to wear, with more thought than she would have admitted, finally settling on a simple black dress she had owned for 2 years and wore to most professional occasions, because it worked every time, without requiring her to think. Her hair was down. She had done her makeup in Diane's bathroom, with Diane leaning in the doorway offering unsolicited commentary until Naomi told her to go away, which Diane had done with cheerful compliance. She knew nobody at the event except Adrian. She had been to events alone before. She was capable of walking into a room full of strangers and finding her footing without difficulty. This was one of her genuine professional competences. But she was aware, standing near the entrance, that she was attending this event for a reason that was not entirely professional, and the awareness of that made the room feel slightly different than rooms usually felt. Adrian found her within 4 minutes of her arrival, which meant he had been watching for her, which she noted without making anything of it. He looked exactly as he always looked. Dark jacket, no tie, a quality of presence that took up slightly more space than his physical dimensions accounted for. His expression as he approached was level and without performance. "You came," he said. "I said I would. People say that, and do not always. I am not usually those people." He nodded, and she saw something in that nod, the smallest register of something like approval or recognition, that she found unexpectedly pleasant. He introduced her to the 2 people he was standing with when he noticed her arrival. A woman named Petra, from an architecture firm who had interested, careful eyes, and asked Naomi a specific question about event logistics within 30 seconds, that led to an actually interesting conversation. A man named Gareth, who worked in brand consultancy, and was funny, in a low-key way that took a moment to catch. The evening proceeded without event, which was itself a form of ease Naomi had not entirely expected. She moved through the room, and spoke to various people, and ate food that was better than it needed to be, and listened to the presentations with genuine attention. Adrian moved through the room in a parallel and occasionally intersecting path. They were not together in the way that would signal anything. They simply both happened to be there, and at certain moments they were near each other, and at other moments they were not. At one point, around 9, she was standing near the windows that looked out over the river, and he came to stand beside her, slightly to her left, looking at the same view. "How are you finding it?" he asked. "The event, or in general?" "Either." "The event is good, better than I expected. And, in general?" She looked at the river. The lights on the far bank were reflected in the dark water in broken lines. "Better," she said. "Slower than I would like, but better." He was quiet for a moment. She had come to understand, in the few exchanges they had shared, that his silences were not uncomfortable. They were simply the space he gave things before responding. "You are one of the more capable people I have encountered," he said eventually. "That is a genuine observation, not flattery." She looked at him. "I have been watching you operate for 4 years," he said. "At events, in professional contexts, you see things other people do not see. You are 3 steps ahead. You manage difficulty without making it visible." He paused. Marcus did not see that, or he saw it and did not understand the value of it. Either way, that is his loss. It is not a comment on your worth. She was very still. No one had said that to her before. Not in those words. Not with that particular quality of directness that did not ask anything from her in return. That was not trying to be comforting, or to close the distance between them. That was simply stating a thing it believed to be true. "Thank you," she said. "I mean it," he said. "I know you do," she said. "That is why it matters." They stood looking at the river for another moment. "I should circulate," she said. "There is a woman over there, from a logistics company I have been trying to reach for 6 months." "Then go," he said. She went. She did not look back, but she was aware of him, the way you are aware of a fixed point, when you are moving through a space. Not loudly, not demanding attention, simply there, steady, at the edge of her peripheral sense. She reached the logistics woman, whose name was Caroline, a fact she registered with a brief irony, and then set aside. The conversation was professional and productive, and led to an exchange of contact details and a provisional meeting in the new year. She drove home to Diane's flat at 10:30, with the windows slightly down, the cold air coming through. She thought about what Adrian had said. She thought about the 4 years she had been watched, apparently, by a man she had never thought to consider. She thought about being 3 steps ahead, which was something she knew about herself, which she had believed Marcus appreciated, when really, she now understood he had simply used. She thought about worth, about the difference between being valued and being convenient. She was only beginning to understand how long she had confused the two. She parked the car. She sat for a moment in the dark street. She was not going to rush anything. She was not going to make a map from point A to point B and call it a plan. She was going to keep doing what she had been doing, waking up, working, making decisions one at a time, trusting herself, in the way she was slowly relearning to trust herself. But she was also, she acknowledged with the kind of honesty she was practicing, beginning to be curious about what came next. That was new. That was something she had not felt in longer than she could place. She got out of the car and went inside, and Diane was asleep on the sofa with the television on low, a blanket pulled up to her chin, entirely peaceful. Naomi turned the television off. She got a second blanket from the cupboard and laid it over Diane's feet. She went to bed. She slept well for the first time in 3 weeks. The meeting with Charles Lund happened on the Wednesday, and it went well. That was the simplest way to say it. Charles Lund was efficient and specific, and clearly had done his research on her work before the meeting, which she respected because she had done the same for his company. They spoke for 90 minutes about a potential partnership arrangement for 3 upcoming corporate events his firm had contracted and was looking to outsource elements of. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that both of them wanted to continue the conversation. She walked out of the meeting into a gray November morning, feeling something she had not felt in a while. Momentum. The particular energy of something moving in the right direction. She called Diane on the walk back to where she had parked. "The meeting?" Diane said, without preamble. "It went well." "How well?" "Partnership level well. Potentially." A pause in which Diane was clearly processing the magnitude of this. "That is huge," Diane said. "It is significant. It is not confirmed. I need to keep my head even." "Your head is always even. Your head is permanently level. Let yourself be pleased." "I am pleased," Naomi said. "I am pleased with my head even." Diane made a sound of affectionate exasperation. "What are you doing tonight?" "Working on the follow-up proposal. Going for a walk. Eating something proper." "Adrian texted me," Diane said. Naomi stopped walking. She was on the pavement outside a bakery, and a woman had to step around her with a slight look. "What?" "He got my number from somewhere, I assume you. And he texted to ask if you were all right. He said he did not want to bother you, but he had not heard from you, and wanted to make sure you were managing." Naomi started walking again. "And you are telling me this because," she said, "because I thought you should know that a man texted me to ask about you, because he did not want to bother you by texting you directly. That is notable behavior." "It is considerate. It is very considerate. Also slightly formal. That is how he is. I noticed." A pause. "I liked him. When he stayed outside with you that night, I liked him." Naomi was quiet. "He did not try to do anything," Diane said. "He just stayed. Do you know how rare that is? For a man to simply stay without trying to fix it or own the moment or make it about himself?" "I know. So what are you doing about it?" "I am going home and working on a proposal." Naomi. Diane. A pause between two people who knew each other too well for pretending. "I am not ready," Naomi said, more quietly. "I did not say you had to be ready. I said, what are you doing?" She thought about that. "I am going home," she said, "and I am going to work on the proposal, and then I am going to message Adrian and tell him I heard he checked in with you, and thank him." "That is something," Diane said. "That is all it is." "That is enough," Diane said. "For now." Naomi got to her car. She sat inside for a moment, with her hands in her lap. The November morning moved around her, gray and ordinary, and forward-moving. She was 4 weeks out from the worst evening of her recent life. She had a potential business partnership beginning to form. She had a spare room in a flat that was starting to feel like a home rather than a stop. She had her health and her work and her best friend and a canal walk she had come to rely on in the mornings. She had, slowly and against the difficulty of it, been putting herself back together in a way that was quieter and more deliberate than the person she had been before the party. And she was beginning to believe that the quieter, more deliberate version might be closer to who she actually was. She sent a message to Adrian. She said she had heard he had checked in with Diane, and that she appreciated it. She said she was doing well. She said the business meeting had gone better than expected. She said she hoped he was managing whatever his own week contained. She sent it before she could revise it. She drove home. She did not check the phone until she was inside, which she considered a victory. His reply was 3 sentences. He said he was glad the meeting had gone well, that he had thought it would, because she was exactly the kind of person Charles Lund's company needed to work with. He said his week was manageable. He said he hoped the proposal went smoothly and that she would let him know how it landed. 3 sentences. No flourish. No performance. She read them once and then set the phone face down and opened her laptop. She worked for 4 hours. She ate dinner. She went for a shorter version of her canal walk in the early evening dark, the water reflecting the lights of the residential buildings along the bank, the cold air sharp and clarifying. She thought about nothing in particular. She thought about the fact that she had, for the first time in a long time, a day that was entirely hers. A day in which she had worked for her own business, made her own plan, eaten when she chose, walked where she chose, messaged someone because she wanted to. She thought about how small that sounded from the outside, and how enormous it felt from the inside. She went home. Diane had made soup. They ate it at the kitchen table in the warm light, and talked about various things that were not the party, or Marcus, or Adrian, or the business meeting, and the ease of that, the ability to simply be 2 people having dinner, was something Naomi held quietly to herself and was grateful for. She slept. She dreamed about the canal. In the morning she woke before 7 and lay in the pale dark and thought about the meeting, about the proposal, about the next step. She was going to be all right. She had known this, in the abstract, since the first morning in the spare room when she had taken stock. But knowing a thing abstractly and feeling it in the body are different countries. She was feeling it now. Not triumphantly, not with dramatic relief, quietly, and with the particular steadiness of someone who has walked a long way and reached a place where they can see the next portion of the path. She got up. She made tea. She opened her laptop and began the day. The autumn shifted into something colder. November became its own particular rhythm, dark mornings and early dusks, and the canal walk taken in layers of clothing that Naomi had been systematically acquiring from a charity shop 2 streets from Diane's flat. Because most of her warmer things had been in a box she could not face unpacking until the 3rd week. She had unpacked everything by November's end. The spare room now had her books on the narrow shelf above the desk, her photographs in 2 frames on the windowsill, her system of organization distributed across the desk, and the small wardrobe and the floor space she had measured and mapped precisely the first time she arranged it. Diane had observed all of this with a quality of indulgent wonder she did not bother concealing. "You have turned my spare room into a functioning studio flat," Diane said one morning. "I have used the available space," Naomi said. "You have created a systems diagram for your toiletries. That is an efficient layout, not a diagram. There are labels. The labels are helpful." Diane had shaken her head with great affection and gone to make coffee. The partnership with Charles Lund's company moved from possible to probable. She had submitted the proposal in the 1st week of November and received feedback within 4 days, which was faster than she had expected, and which Charles himself noted was a record. The feedback was specific and actionable, and she had addressed each point and resubmitted, and was now in the stage of practical negotiation around terms, which was the stage that could go any direction, but which she was navigating carefully. She had also, quietly, acquired 2 new private clients on her own. Not through Marcus's orbit, not through any of the channels that had been connected to that life. Through her own reputation, her own referrals, the fruit of 2 years of work in London done well. A corporate birthday celebration, large scale. A company anniversary dinner for a technology firm she had been introduced to through Petra, the architect she had met at the event near the river. Petra had become, in the way these things sometimes happened, an unexpectedly welcome presence. They had met for coffee once in November, and discovered that they had similar thoughts about how their respective industries were changing, and that they made each other laugh, and that they both preferred directness over performance. They had made plans to meet again. Naomi had not had a new friend in a long time. She had maintained Diane, which was not small, and a handful of more peripheral connections, but the active business of making space for someone new had not happened in years. She had been too busy arranging herself around Marcus, fitting into his schedule, attending his things, maintaining his social landscape. She saw the pattern clearly now. She could see the whole shape of it from the outside, the way you can see a maze from above that you cannot see from within. She had not been a passive participant. She had chosen it, step by step, because the alternative had felt too uncertain. She had been afraid of the empty space that might exist if she was not filling it with usefulness. She was learning what the empty space actually felt like. It did not feel empty. It felt like room. Adrian called on a Thursday evening in the 2nd week of November, using the phone number he had called before, at a time that was unremarkable, a few minutes after 7. She was making pasta in Diane's kitchen, which she did on Thursdays, when Diane worked late because she found cooking a useful form of thinking, and the kitchen was hers on Thursday evenings. She answered with sauce on her hands. "I am cooking," she said. "I can call back," he said. "No, it is fine. I can do 2 things at once." A pause that felt, very faintly, like amusement. "I do not doubt it." She stirred. She asked him how the week had been. He said it had been demanding. He described, briefly and without excessive detail, a situation at work involving a contract dispute that had required 3 days of focused resolution. She listened. She asked a specific question. He answered it. They talked about it for a few minutes, in the way that 2 people talk about a problem when they are both actually interested in problems and in how they get solved. Then he said, "I am coming to see something you are working on." She stopped stirring. "What do you mean?" "The anniversary dinner for the technology firm. I know the founder. He is a client of mine, in a different capacity. He mentioned the name of the events company he had hired, and I realized it was yours." She absorbed this. "You are coming to the dinner?" she said. "Not as a guest. The founder has asked me to join his table." "That is a guest." "Yes," he agreed. "I suppose it is." She resumed stirring. She thought about this. Adrian Voss, who she was increasingly aware existed in her life in a way that was different from how he had not existed in it before, was going to be at the first significant solo event she had produced since rebuilding. "Will that be strange for you?" he asked. "If I am there?" She considered the honest answer. No, she said, it will not be strange. All right? But you should know, she said, that on the evening of that event, I am working. I will be distracted, and focused, and moving quickly, and I may not have time to exchange more than 2 sentences with you. I am not coming to exchange sentences with you, he said. I am coming because the founder invited me. I know. I am just noting what the evening will look like. Naomi. His voice was very level. I understand how you work. I have been watching you work for 4 years. I will not be in your way. She looked at the pasta pot. I know you will not, she said. Good. Good night, Adrian. Good night. She ended the call and finished the pasta, and set 2 places at the table, and then realized Diane was not home, and put 1 set of cutlery away, and ate alone with her phone, face down on the table, which she had decided was her rule. No phones at meals, a rule she had not had before, but was finding she needed. She thought about what it meant, that he would be at the dinner. She thought about the way he had said, I understand how you work, with that calm certainty, as though it were simply a fact he had observed and filed. She thought about the 4 years. She thought about how much of those 4 years she had spent in rooms with Adrian Voss, and never once considered him as a person worth thinking about in any sustained way. She had been so focused on the relationship she was in, so committed to its maintenance, so busy making herself fit inside it, that she had not looked up long enough to notice what else was in the room. She washed her dish. She left the kitchen clean. She went to the spare room that had become her room, and sat at her desk, and opened the laptop, and checked her email, and found a message from Charles Lund, confirming that the final terms were agreed, and the partnership was signed, and she would receive the formal documentation by end of week. She read it twice. Then she sat very still for a moment. Then she closed the laptop and put her head down on her folded arms on the desk and stayed there, not in distress, simply allowing herself to feel the fullness of the moment without managing it or organizing it or turning it into anything beyond what it was. A contract, her name on it, no one else's. She would tell Diane when she got home. She would tell no one else yet. She lifted her head and opened the laptop again. She had work to do. December came in on a cold, clear day that Naomi spent entirely on her own, the first full Sunday she had had, with no obligations and no social engagements, and no one requiring her attention. Diane was visiting her family, and had offered to cancel, and Naomi had firmly declined the offer, and spent a small amount of effort convincing Diane she actually meant it. She meant it. She went for the canal walk at 8 in the morning, her longest one yet, going further than she usually did, past the point where she normally turned back, along a stretch she had not been down before, where the canal widened and there were boats moored along one bank, and an iron footbridge with a view that made her stop. She stood on the bridge for a few minutes. The morning was pale and cold, and entirely quiet. The water moved slowly beneath her. A heron stood on the far bank, with the complete stillness that herons have, as though they have made a private decision about patience. She thought about Naomi Caldwell at 24, beginning her first job at the Bristol firm, organized and ambitious and very eager to be of use. She thought about Naomi at 26, meeting Marcus at a friend's dinner party, and feeling, for the first time in a while, like someone was actually looking at her when they talked to her. She thought about Naomi at 27, moving to London, telling herself it was a career choice, when actually it was a love choice, and believing that those two things were interchangeable. She thought about Naomi at 31, on an iron footbridge in December, watching a heron, alone and solvent and no longer afraid of the empty space. She walked home. She spent the afternoon working on an idea she had had for a new service structure, a tier of smaller-scale events, aimed at the kind of private clients who had a modest budget but wanted something genuinely good rather than something off a template. She had been thinking about this for a month and had not had a clear enough day to actually develop it. She sat at her desk and wrote for 3 hours, and then had a bath and ate leftovers from the fridge and read for an hour before bed. It was a good day, entirely straightforward and unmemorable from the outside and genuinely nourishing from the inside. She had forgotten how much she liked her own company. The technology company anniversary dinner was in the second week of December. She arrived at the venue 3 hours before the guests to run her standard pre-event check, which she did at every event regardless of scale, because the pre-event check had saved her from significant problems on 7 separate occasions, and she had no intention of trusting that it would not be needed. The venue, a converted dining room in a private members building in Marylebone, was already set up by the in-house team, and she went through it room by room with her checklist, adjusting 3 small things, confirming the catering order, speaking with the sound technician about a minor issue with the ambient audio level that was quickly resolved. By 6, she was ready. Guests arrived from 7. She positioned herself near the door for the first 40 minutes, the most complicated period, when questions arose, and introductions were being made, and the atmosphere of the evening was being established. She wore a dark jacket over a plain shirt and kept her clipboard at her side, because she had long ago stopped caring what people thought about the clipboard and had started thinking of it as a professional accessory. She was aware of the moment Adrian arrived. She did not make a particular effort to be aware of it. She simply was. He was with 2 other men she did not know, and he came through the door and scanned the room, in the quick analytical way he always seemed to scan rooms, and his gaze found her briefly, and he gave a single small nod, and she returned it, and he moved into the room. That was all. She went back to her clipboard. The evening ran well. Not perfectly, because events never ran perfectly, but very well, with only 2 minor issues, both of which she handled before they became visible to any guest. The founder gave a short speech that was warm, and exactly the right length. The food was excellent. The ambient audio worked correctly throughout. At around 9, during the slower stretch of the evening, when the guests had settled into conversations and her active management was reduced to monitoring, she found herself near the edge of the room for a moment. Adrian was speaking with a small group near the far wall. He was listening to someone with that particular quality of focused attention, his head slightly angled, his expression engaged rather than politely present. He glanced up and caught her looking. She did not look away. Neither did he. It was perhaps 3 seconds, and then she turned back to the room and walked toward the catering station to check the dessert timing. She did not think about those 3 seconds for the rest of the evening. She put them in the corner of her awareness and left them there and did her job, which she did well, which she always did well, because that was who she was. At the end of the evening, when the guests were leaving and she was overseeing the clear-up and speaking with the venue manager, Adrian appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision. He waited. He did not interrupt. He simply waited until she had finished her conversation, with the patience she had come to recognize as characteristic, and then he stepped forward. "Good evening," he said. "How was it?" she said, from a guest's perspective. "Excellent," he said. "Exactly the right level for the founder's intentions. Nothing excessive, nothing insufficient." She accepted this. Good to hear. He looked around the room, at the team she had brought clearing up quietly and efficiently. "Your operation is impressive," he said, "even more so in practice than on paper." "Thank you. I have a good team." "You built the team." "Yes." He looked at her. She looked back at him. "I would like to take you for dinner," he said. He said it in exactly the tone he said everything else. Level, direct, without preamble, and without asking in a way that buried the question. He was simply stating what he would like, and leaving space for her answer. She took a breath. "Not tonight," she said. "I need to finish here, and I am going to be tired." "I know. I meant generally, when it suits you." She was quiet for a moment. "Why dinner?" she said, not challenging, genuinely curious. "Because I would like to sit across a table from you somewhere that is not an event," he said. "Because I want to talk to you without either of us being occupied with something else. Because I find you genuinely interesting, and I have found that for a long time, and I think you should know that." She looked at him. She was aware of the team working around them, of the sounds of glasses being collected and chairs being rearranged, of the ordinary world continuing, in its ordinary way, around this moment that was quietly, irreversibly, not ordinary. She thought about the corridor at the back of the engagement party venue, and the lamp above the door, and the way he had stood there in the dark without trying to fill it. She thought about the steady calls, the 3-sentence messages, the way he had checked in with Diane because he did not want to crowd her. She thought about 4 years of making herself small and how that had ended. She thought about who she was becoming, the version of herself that walked along canals in the early morning, and made soup on Thursdays, and had a signed contract with her own name on it, and a drawer of her own, in a borrowed room, and a new friend, who made her laugh, and was not afraid of the empty space anymore. She thought about what it meant to be chosen by someone who had been paying attention, actually paying attention, for longer than she had known to be possible. January, she said. He held very still. January, she said again. I need December. I have a lot of work in December, and I am going to give all of it proper attention, and I am going to spend Christmas with my family, and I am going to rest. In January, I will have dinner with you. He said nothing for a moment. All right, he said. January. Yes. She looked at him one more time and then turned back to her team. He left. She finished the clear-up. She spoke with the venue manager. She drove home. She went inside. Diane was asleep again. She got a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window for a moment, looking at the dark street. January. She was not afraid of January. She was, she realized, actually looking forward to it. She went to bed. Outside, the city made its quiet, late-night sounds. Somewhere in the distance, a single set of footsteps on an empty street. The year was almost done. She was only beginning. January arrived the way January always does, cold and deliberate, with the quality of a new page before anything is written on it. Naomi woke on the 2nd of January, after Christmas with her family, which had been gentle and slightly strange in the way that gatherings are, when something significant has shifted, and everyone is being thoughtful about not naming it, and after New Year's Eve at Diane's flat with Petra and 2 of Diane's other friends, with a small gathering, and good food, and the kind of laughter that costs nothing, and restores a lot. She had texted Adrian on the 31st, a few minutes before midnight. She had said she hoped the year ending had treated him decently, and that she was looking forward to the dinner in January. He had replied almost immediately, which told her something she filed away. He had said likewise on both counts. She called him on the 3rd of January. You said January, she said when he answered. I remember. I am available Friday of next week, she said, or Sunday the week after. I will let you choose. Friday, he said without hesitation. Friday then. She did not prolong the call. She had things to get back to. He seemed to understand this, or perhaps he simply did not prolong calls himself, which she suspected was true. She went back to the proposal she was drafting. The week proceeded normally, which was becoming one of her favorite descriptions of things. Normal felt like an achievement. Normal felt like a place she had built, deliberately, one reasonable day at a time, and that now held her with some reliability. On Friday, she chose a restaurant. She had thought about it for several days, with more seriousness than she would have admitted, finally settling on a small Italian place in Clerkenwell that she had been to once before, and liked for its specific quality of being good, without being performative. She made the reservation for 7:30, and told Adrian the name and address, and he confirmed with a single short message. She arrived at 7:25, which was slightly early, and the host showed her to the table, a corner one with good sight lines, which she had requested. Adrian arrived at 7:30 exactly. He sat down across from her and looked at her and said, "You are here." "I said I would be," she said. "I know." He looked at the table and then back at her. "I am glad you are." She thought about what a different year it had been. She thought about the corridor outside the party venue, and the lamp, and the woman who had stood there convincing herself that what she felt was excitement. She thought about 14 minutes at Marcus's flat collecting her things, and the keys left on the counter. She thought about the canal in October light, and the spare room becoming her room, and Charles Lund's signed contract with her name on it, and Petra, and the heron on the bank. She thought about all of it, and she sat across from this man in a small Italian restaurant in January, and she felt clear, in a way she had not felt in a very long time. "Shall we order?" she said. They ordered. They ate slowly. The conversation moved across topics with an ease she had not quite anticipated, though she was not sure why she had not anticipated it, given everything she had observed about him. He was curious and direct, and willing to disagree with her, which she found refreshing in a way she had missed, without knowing she had missed it. She disagreed with him twice on substantive points, and he listened carefully both times, and shifted his position on one of them after she made her argument, which she respected. He asked her about the business. She told him, honestly, including the parts that were still difficult, the clients she had lost, the uncertainty of the early weeks, the strange quality of rebuilding, not just the practical structure, but the sense of herself as someone capable of building it. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You did not rebuild from the rubble. You built from what you had known about yourself before the rubble. That is different." She looked at him. "The clarity you have now," he said. "It was not created by what happened at the party. It was revealed by it. You were already the person you are becoming. You just had not had enough space to become her." She was very quiet. "You have space now," he said. She breathed. She thought about her mother's kitchen and the particular language of love as effort. She thought about the years she had spent making herself useful in case someone left. She thought about the seatbelt grip on her arm on the worst evening, and the lamp, and "I have you" said without question or performance. "I do," she said. "I have a lot of space." He looked at her across the table in the warm restaurant, with the ordinary Friday night noise of the city outside the window, and he said nothing, and he did not need to. They stayed until the restaurant was mostly empty. They walked to the end of the street together and stood in the January cold, and she was aware of her own steadiness, the way her feet were planted, the way she felt fully present in her own body, without bracing for anything. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Thank you for January," he said. She almost smiled. "You remembered." "I remember a great deal," he said. She looked at him. He looked back. The city hummed around them. "February?" she said. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. It was the direction of one. "February," he said. She walked to her car. She did not look back. She drove through the January streets with the heat on and the radio low, and the sense of herself, particular and complete and quietly beginning, exactly where she needed to be. There is a version of a story like this one, where everything moves quickly once it begins, where the clarity of a first dinner translates immediately into a second and a third, and then into something named and declared and publicly known, where the woman who rebuilt herself finds that the rebuilding was the hard part, and what follows is simply the reward. That was not how it went for Naomi. February was dinner, in a small French place in Bermondsey, that Adrian had found, and which was better than it looked from the outside. March was a walk along the river on a Sunday afternoon, long enough that they needed to find somewhere warm to sit for an hour before walking back. A coffee place that turned out to have very good cake. April was a concert, classical, in a small venue, a booking Adrian had made based on something Naomi had said once about a composer she liked, which she only realized when the program listed the name, and which she did not mention because there was no version of mentioning it that would not be embarrassing, though she filed it. They talked about work and about difficulties, and about the things that had shaped them, slowly, and without rushing toward any conclusion. He told her things about his family, his parents' separation when he was young, the way he had learned to operate from behind a certain reserve because showing feeling had felt, in that household, like leaving something valuable in an unlocked room. She listened to this with the attention she gave things that mattered, without trying to fix it, or to compare it, or to offer it back immediately. She told him things she had not told many people, about the patterns she had seen in herself, the contorting, the making convenient, the choosing comfort over truth, about the morning in Diane's spare room when she had lain in the fabric softener quiet and taken stock of everything she had lost, and then, with the kind of logic she had not expected, of everything she might not have been using. He listened in the way that was different from how other people listened, without waiting for his moment, without reducing what she said into something manageable. He simply held it. In May, she signed the lease on a flat in Stoke Newington, 1 bedroom, south-facing, good light, a small study that she immediately began furnishing, with the precision of someone who had spent the better part of a year living inside someone else's space, and had a great deal of considered opinion about her own. Diane helped her move, and they ordered food afterward, and ate it on boxes, in the empty sitting room, and Diane cried a little, not unhappily, just fully, the way Diane did most things. "This is yours," Diane said, looking around the empty room. "Yes," Naomi said. "Completely yours. Completely." Diane wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I am very proud of you." Naomi looked at her. "I know you think you just survived something," Diane said. "But what I watched you do this year is not surviving. You went through something that would have broken a lot of people, and you came out of it more yourself than you were when you went in. That is not nothing." Naomi did not have words for what she felt in that moment. She reached over and took Diane's hand, and they sat on the boxes in the empty flat, as the evening came in through the south-facing window. Adrian helped her assemble the furniture over a weekend in early June. She had not asked him to do this. He had said, when she mentioned she was moving in and had flat-pack furniture arriving, that he would come if she wanted help. She said yes. He came. What she observed over that weekend was notable. He did not take over. He did not arrive with an agenda or with a plan for how the furniture should be arranged. He read the instructions carefully. He asked where she wanted each piece before starting. He worked steadily and without complaint. When she changed her mind about where the desk should go, having moved it from one wall to another and then back again, he moved it without comment, which she told him she appreciated, and he said it was her flat, and the desk should go where she found it useful, which was such a straightforward answer that she felt briefly something she did not quite have a name for. By Sunday evening, the flat was assembled and livable. They ordered food and ate it, sitting on the new sofa in the new sitting room, and it was ordinary and comfortable, and she was aware, sitting there, of a specific quality of ease she had not felt in the presence of someone she was interested in. She had felt useful. She had felt convenient. She had felt, sometimes, seen, but in a way that made her want to perform the seeing, rather than simply to be. This was different. This was the ease of being in a room with someone who already knew what they were seeing and was not asking her to be anything additional. She thought about the party, about the corridor, about the 4 seconds of not remembering, that morning in Diane's spare room. She thought about the lamp above the back door. She thought about "I have you." She was aware, in the quiet of the new flat with the food containers on the coffee table and the evening light going orange through the south-facing window, that she loved him. She was not going to say it tonight. She was not going to rush toward the saying of it the way she had rushed toward certainty in the past, building her life around a feeling before she had checked the ground beneath her feet. She was going to let it be what it was for a little while, known only to herself, held carefully. But she knew it, clearly and without any anxiety attached to the knowing, which was new, which was everything. He left at 9, because she had an early morning, and he had said so when he arrived, "I will leave early," which she had also filed. He stood at the door of the flat that was entirely hers. "Thank you," she said, "for the weekend. Thank you for letting me be here," he said. She looked at him in the doorway. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." She thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about the particular quality of honesty she had been practicing for nearly a year. She thought about the canal walk, and the heron, and the signed contract, and the flat, and the desk she had moved twice, and the ease of the sofa, and the orange light. "I am glad you stayed," she said, "at the party. I know it was a long time ago. I am glad you stayed." He was very still. "I had not planned to leave," he said. She held that. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Naomi," he said. She closed the door. She stood in her flat, the lights on, the boxes half unpacked, the south-facing window dark now, the city doing what cities do. She breathed. She was 32 years old. She had a flat with good light. She had a business with her name on it, growing, real. She had a best friend, and a new friend, and a canal walk, and a heron. She had a year behind her that had taken everything and given her, unexpectedly and without being asked, herself. And she had the beginning of something she was going to let be careful and slow and entirely grounded, because she knew the difference now between being chosen and being convenient, and she knew which one she was this time, and she was not going to rush past it. She was going to live inside it slowly. She turned off the light in the sitting room and walked to the bedroom and pulled back the new duvet on the new bed. She slept. She dreamed of nothing she would remember in the morning. She was already where she needed to be. The opening of Naomi's company, under her own name, fully and formally, came in September. Not the tentative version from 2 years before, the one she had half hidden behind modest language and careful caveats, and the implicit reassurance of being connected to someone else. This was its own thing, properly named and branded and announced, with a website she had worked on with a designer named Lena, who had the kind of taste Naomi genuinely respected, and a launch event she had planned herself, which was either very appropriate or completely inevitable depending on how you looked at it. Diane had said it was both. The event was small, deliberately small, 50 people, not 70. A space in Shoreditch with good light and better bones. A venue she had passed once on the canal walk, and noted, and returned to look at twice, before approaching the owners. The flowers were simple and white. There were no photographs at the center of the tables. There was very good food, and very good wine, and the kind of lighting that required no adjustments, because she had arranged it correctly the first time. She stood near the door as people arrived, and felt, in her chest, the specific feeling she had tried to mistake for excitement once before. She knew what it was now. It was not fear in a costume. It was the real thing, the clean, clear, genuine version of it. Diane arrived first, which was also inevitable, and hugged her once, hard, without saying anything. Petra came with a colleague from the architecture firm and a bottle of wine she handed to Naomi, with a look that communicated a great deal without words. Charles Lund from the partnership firm arrived, and shook her hand, and said the business had been the best professional decision he had made in the past 2 years, which he said plainly, and without flattery, which was why she believed it. Her aunt arrived. Her cousin Patrick, who danced with no rhythm and no inhibition at any event he attended, and who she loved completely for that. And at 7:20, just as the room had reached the comfortable fullness she had been aiming for, the door opened and Adrian came in. He was on his own. He came directly toward her, the way he always moved through rooms, without circling the long way around. He looked at her. "You did this," he said. Not a question. An observation, delivered with the particular weight he gave to things he meant. She looked around the room. The white flowers, the good light she had arranged correctly the first time, the 50 people who were there because of her work, her name, her decisions, the years she had spent rebuilding, on ground that was solid, because it was hers alone. "I did," she said. He nodded once. And in his face, which she had spent a year learning to read, not decoding it, but simply watching it long enough to understand the language, she saw something that she would not have had words for at the beginning of all this. It was not pride in the possessive sense. It was not satisfaction at an outcome he had predicted. It was something closer to what happens in a person who has quietly believed in something, and then watched it come true, and who does not need to announce that they believed, because the outcome speaks for itself. She understood, in that moment, that he had never once felt uncertain about her. She had spent a long time being uncertain about herself. She had moved cities, and organized other people's parties, and made herself smaller and more convenient, and closed her eyes to the things she did not want to see, all because she had not quite believed she was worth the full, undivided, honest version of being chosen. She believed it now. Not because he had told her. Not because anyone had told her. Because she had walked herself through the hardest year of her recent life, and had come out of it on the other side, still standing, still building, still herself, and actually more herself than she had been before. And that was not a small thing, and she was no longer going to treat it as one. She looked at Adrian. He was watching her with that quality of attention she had first noticed behind the party venue, in the lamplight, on the worst evening, the same quality, unbroken, and direct, and entirely without performance. "I am glad you are here," she said. "I would not have missed it," he said. She stayed with that. She thought about the woman in the corridor, who had stood alone, adjusting the same curl, for the 4th time, not knowing what was coming. She thought about how much she would want to say to that woman, if she could, not to warn her, not to save her the pain, because the pain had been the making of the clarity, and the clarity was the most valuable thing she had, but simply to tell her that she would be all right, that the person she was enough, that she did not need to make herself fit. She did not say any of this out loud. She simply stood in the room she had built, in the clean, warm light, in the company of people who were there because she had built something worth showing up for, and she felt exactly where she was. "I should go and talk to people," she said. You should, he said. Go. She went. She moved through the room and talked to every person there, properly, with her full attention, the way she always worked when it mattered. She laughed with Patrick. She thanked Charles. She stood with Petra and her colleague for 20 minutes, talking about an idea that had been forming in her head for months, about a collaboration between events and space design, and felt the particular energy of a conversation where two capable people are making something real. She did not keep track of Adrian across the room. She did not need to. She could simply sense him the way you sense a fixed point in a space you are moving through, steady and there, and not requiring anything from her at this moment, except for her to do exactly what she was doing. At 9, the event moved into its final stretch. She gave a brief speech, less than 5 minutes, which she had written and rewritten and then thrown away and written again from scratch. She said something honest about what the year had been. She said something true about the difference between building on someone else's foundation and building your own. She did not mention Marcus. She did not mention the party. She did not need to. The room understood, in the way rooms understand things when the person speaking is being genuinely honest, rather than performing honesty. She thanked Diane, by name, which made Diane press her lips together very hard. She thanked the 50 people in the room for being there, and she meant it. She stepped back from the microphone. The room responded with something warm and real. Later, after the last guests had left, and the caterers were clearing, and she was doing her final walk of the space, checking nothing, because everything was already correctly in order, just walking, because she needed to be in the room one final time, before it became someone else's space again. Adrian fell into step beside her. They walked the perimeter of the room together without speaking, past the white flowers, past the tables with their good linens, past the good light she had arranged correctly the first time. At the end of the room, near the window that looked onto the street below, they stopped. She looked at the street, the ordinary late September city, people walking, cars passing, the particular quality of the air in that specific hour. How do you feel? He said. She thought about it genuinely. Complete, she said. He was quiet. Not finished, she added. The opposite, like something that has been partial for a long time is now whole. He looked at her. She looked back at him. The city moved below the window. I should tell you something, she said. All right. She had been waiting for the right moment. She had been telling herself she would know when it arrived. She had been wrong about a great many things in the past 2 years, but she had not been wrong about this one. She knew when it arrived. She said it plainly and without decoration, in the way she had learned from him, because honesty did not require an elaborate setting, and the truth deserved to be stated directly to the person it belonged to. He heard it. He was entirely still. And then he said it back to her, the same words, in the same plain way, as though they were simply a fact he had known for a long time, and was finally, with her permission, allowing out into the room. She laughed. She had not expected to laugh. He looked at her with the corner of his mouth, doing that thing that was not quite a smile. What? He said. It just sounds like you, she said. Exactly like you. Is that a problem? It is the opposite of a problem, she said. They stood at the window above the September street. The room was quiet. The light was exactly right. She had built this. All of it. The room, the company, the year, the version of herself who stood in it without bracing. He had not built it for her. He had simply stayed close enough that she always knew, somewhere below the surface, that someone was paying attention, that someone had been watching her, with genuine respect, long before she knew she deserved it, that when she needed a fixed point, there was one. She would think later about the mechanics of how they had found each other, the specific shape of the terrible evening that had opened into this one. She would think about the way disaster can be the thing that clears enough space for the truth to walk through. She would not be grateful for the pain. That was not what she was. But she would be grateful for who she was on the other side of it. She was 32 years old. She had a flat with good light and a desk in exactly the right place. She had a business with her name on it, standing on its own ground. She had a best friend who loved her loudly, and a new friend who made her laugh, and a canal walk, and a heron, and a signed contract, and a spare drawer that was no longer spare. She had a year behind her that had cost everything, and returned more than she had known she was carrying. And she had a man standing beside her at a window above an autumn street, who had been telling her the truth the entire time, even before she was ready to hear it, and who was not in any hurry, and who was staying. "Shall we go?" he said. She looked at the room one final time. "Yes," she said. They left together. The door closed behind them. The room held the shape of the evening for a little while longer. The good light, the white flowers beginning to close, the space that had been made and used and was now given back. Outside, the September city hummed. Two people walked down the street, toward whatever the next thing was, not rushing, not afraid, simply moving forward, into the unplanned and decent and genuinely theirs.